Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum. On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, we try to assess what's wrong with this Indiana basketball team. And I know that seems a little crazy. It's like, hey, Indiana's 12-3, right? And, 2-2 in the Big Ten. They just won a game. What do you mean, what's wrong with IU basketball? Well, I think if you've been watching the games, and I would surmise that if you listen to this show, you have been, you know as well as I do that there are currently some things wrong with this Indiana basketball team and even the program as a whole that are going to make it hard for Indiana to keep winning games if they don't get them fixed. And so Alex is here, I'm here, and then Dylan Wallace, one of our student interns for this season, who, if you've been reading his work at InsideTheHall.com and our post-game analysis emails that we send out at assemblycall.com, you know that he's really been doing some good work. And so Dylan has some really good insight. In fact, later on in the conversation, we talk about this idea of shortening the rotation and what that will actually mean. And I thought Dylan made a great point and the right point about that particular topic. So, we kind of go through it all, the micro, the macro, trying to figure out what's going on with this team, what they need to do to improve, all of that with an eye toward Saturday against Ohio State and beyond as this Big Ten season really gets into full swing. So we appreciate you being here. Hope you enjoy this episode of Podcast on the Brink. Coming up next, my conversation with Alex Bozich and Dylan Wallace. All right, I'm here with Alex Bozich and Dillon Wallace. And gentlemen, let's talk about this IU basketball team. Because on the one hand, you look at things, there is absolutely a legitimate glass half full picture that you can paint of Indiana being 12-3, being 2-2 in the conference, which I think is good enough for like fifth place right now. Having some key wins away from home against teams that, are NIT level, but at least you've proven you can win away from home against UConn and Notre Dame. And I think if you had told a lot of people before the season what you would get up to this point from a Rob Phinisee, some other guys that have really struggled, I think a lot of us would have said, wow, we're going to be 12-3. Okay, I'll take that. And having 12 wins in the bank on January 10th is good. And yet, there is a lot of consternation. There is a lot of concern about what lays ahead for this Indiana team, as now you basically only have one game left on your schedule against a team that is currently, lower than 40th, I think, in KenPom because of how good the Big Ten is, and that's the upcoming game against Nebraska. So, Alex, let's spend a little time trying to diagnose what's wrong with Indiana right now. Because, yes, Indiana won Wednesday night against Northwestern. It was an important win. They've held serve at home in Big Ten play. But there were so many issues that popped up in that game that are glaring, and that against a better team, that doesn't have a former lacrosse player playing key minutes at guard, you probably get exposed and you lose that game. So all credit to Indiana for coming back and winning. The grit and resolve they showed was great, and maybe they found something in that they can apply moving forward. But there are still issues bubbling, if not above the surface, right below the surface, that have to get fixed before this team really jumps into the heart of Big Ten play, which frankly starts on Saturday at home against Ohio State.
Yeah, I've struggled with just kind of my overall thoughts right now because I feel like you can, in the aftermath of a performance like we saw at Wisconsin, the one we saw at Maryland, even the one against Northwestern where they won the game but they didn't play well, I feel like you can get caught up too much in one game and make a big judgment on something based on, one event. I think the thing that I keep coming back to, though, is there's now become a pattern of certain things that we've seen for Indiana basketball under Archie Miller, not just this season, but the previous two as well. And this year, I think the things that are most concerning to me from watching this team up close, and I haven't been at every game, but I've been at every home game. I've been at the Crossroads Classic. We've had someone essentially at every game. But, the things that I see that are recurring are inconsistent effort. And that, to me, suggests there's a disconnect somewhere between whether the expectations that are being set by the staff on the players or the players being willing to accept those expectations and go and carry them out. You can't have repeated performances of guys playing well for 20 minutes and then all of a sudden you don't score for a couple of possessions and people aren't running back on defense. And quite frankly, the best example I can give you from the other night was, the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game, Devonte Green was, really not even guarding his man. It was some of the most laughable defense that I've seen this season. And to me, that's a senior on your team. This is not Armand Franklin. This is not a newcomer to the program. This is somebody that's been coached by this staff now for 2.5 years. That's one thing. The other thing is these consistent droughts that come within every game. It seems like every game there's a point in the game where Indiana's going to have, maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 7 minutes, maybe it's 8 minutes where they're just completely lost offensively. It's like some of the guys have never seen each other. They don't know kind of what they're supposed to be doing. And to me, that's like kind of adding on to this disconnect that's somewhere. It's really hard to pinpoint these issues because as much as we watch the games, as much as we watch warm-ups, as much as we are in front of these guys for availability, we don't know all of the factors that are going on behind closed doors. We don't know what's emphasized in practice. We don't know what certain guys are thinking. So, and I've never been a person to speculate, so-and-so's unhappy or so-and-so's not doing this or that, but it just seems like something's wrong. And it's very difficult to pinpoint one thing. But I think the problem right now in terms of, the negativity from the fan base, which in my eyes is completely justified in many ways, is that these same things keep happening over and over and they don't seem to be getting better. Archie keeps talking about the same things after every game and there doesn't seem to be any improvement. And that's where people start to lose hope because the coach is kind of in charge of driving that improvement. Last year it took the Minnesota game where they were, really far deep into a losing streak. The season was almost already lost at that point to Archie kind of have the line in the sand moment that kind of turned things. Maybe the other night was the line in the sand moment for this season and things turn. It's just unfortunate that these things keep happening over and over. And I think that's my biggest concern at this point.
Dylan, what do you think about that? You were at Archie's press conference, right? After the game against Northwestern. Did you?
No, I was talking to Chris Collins, actually.
Okay, so you weren't there in person. Well, Alex, were you there in person as Archie was delivering that? I mean, did you?
How was it?
Because when you see the words kind of come across Twitter and you read them, they certainly sounded different. Like it sounded like in his mind that was a line in the sand moment. Did you get that impression being there? Like, did it seem different? Did it feel different? Do you have some reason to believe that maybe what happened last year after the Minnesota game is going to happen a month earlier here and nip some of this in the bud?
It could be. The thing that really I noticed different the other night, and from my vantage point, I have a pretty good view of the bench, and kind of, Archie just seemed a lot more, he's always into the game. He's always up and yelling. He just seemed a lot, he seemed like at some points he was going to lose it, in terms of just some of the things he was watching. It just kind of continued to manifest itself, and I can't really describe it. It wasn't that he was a whole lot different, but you could just see the way he was reacting to certain guys that his patience was starting to run thin. And then after the game, usually guys I've had instances where, under Tom Crean, it used to be an hour before he would come in. And this year I've routinely been leaving my seat with 2 or 3 minutes to go and the game to get back to the press room because I'm scared the players are going to get back in there and start talking before I get there. And this game was a little bit different in that it took them a little bit longer to come in. So it would almost seem like there was something in terms of the messaging after the game wasn't as short and to the point as what we've seen in the past. That was really the things I noticed different. But in terms of his words, I mean, until we see if it changes, I can't tell you if it's just words, if it's just him saying something. Or
no, I know the words.
I'm just kind
of curious about how you felt viscerally, because the words are what they are, But it seemed to me like there was a little bit, a little more frustration, a little more resolve behind the words.
It also seemed
I'm
like
holding on to for hope.
It seemed like he was talking about specific people too when he talked about the rotation. It was almost like, hey, certain guys aren't giving. He did without naming anybody, and I don't think you can name somebody because if you start saying X, Y, and Z can't play anymore, then you're basically throwing guys under the bus and you're going to lose them. Some people might say, why do you care at this point? Those guys aren't contributing anything. I just don't think that's how you run a program. But, what I want to see in terms of going forward is how things change if they do at all.
Right, Dylan's over here like Jerome Hunter wanting to come off the bench and take a shot. So, Dylan, get in here and give us your thoughts on what you've seen from up close.
Yeah, so I mean, I will say after their losses, so go to Wisconsin and Arkansas, Archie's always seemed decently calm kind of after games. He seemed very poised after losses. And obviously, Northwestern wasn't a loss, but it was the win that felt most like a loss. And it seemed like, to me, I did kind of catch like the back half of his press conference because I came in later, but it just seemed like when he was talking about the rotation, like it was definitely like he knew things needed to change. And I'm really curious to see what those changes are going to be, because who's going to come out of the rotation. Obviously, you can have some guesses, but it's unknown because each player has their own way of kind of impacting the game if they play up to their potential. But it's just right now, and Alex touched on this, is that the problem is just the effort. And a picture was tweeted at me yesterday, and I know it's been kind of surfaced on Twitter, of when the team was making the run down 10 against Northwestern. There's a picture of the bench, and everyone's standing up except for two players, and it's Devonte Green and Deron Davis. They're just sitting down, like disinterested, and like, those are your two seniors. You can't have that. One of them is your captain, and you just can't have something like that. And I think on a few episodes ago on Podcast on the Brink, you guys were talking about how Deron Davis didn't seem very enthusiastic on the bench either. So it's just like, your two leaders, your two seniors who have been here for 4 years, and one of them is your captain, and at times your starting point guard. That stuff you can't have. And it's been evident throughout the year that there are times where they're not as motivated, and it took them to get down 10 against Northwestern with 10 minutes to go for them to finally get motivated. And I think it was a good sign to see them make that run and come back, because if that game was a loss, everything would be different. But since they won, they're keeping their heads a little bit above water at this point in the season, to where maybe you can hope that things will turn around. So the rotation to me is very interesting, and if he shortens it, maybe that'll change some things. Maybe it'll have guys playing harder because they're playing longer. I don't know, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, think about how bad things feel right now, and then add a loss to Northwestern on top of that. It would not be good. So it sounds to me like you guys kind of have the same premise I do, and I wrote about this over at assemblycall.com earlier this week, which is, what the biggest underlying problem is, because there are issues with this team executing the pack line, and there are issues with this team's offensive execution, and we talked about it all on this show, on the assembly call. They need to go into trace more. They probably need to try and set some screens for guards to get them open. Like, it feels like there's 100 different tactical things that we all would like to see happen that feel like reasonable adjustments. It also feels like none of that stuff is going to matter if it's not laid on top of a foundation of a group of people moving in the same direction with the same purpose, that are playing the game with some level of enthusiasm. Because I think I am always hesitant to say that guys are not playing hard, because I think Indiana's players are trying for the most part. Now, there are times where they jog back and things like that, but I actually think that's more manifestation of a lack of enthusiasm and a lack of belief in what's going on than guys just being lazy. I just don't think most college athletes are like lazy and just not going to play hard. But I feel like when you maybe don't believe in what you're doing, there's a disconnect, there, then some of that stuff, it looks like that on the court. And so, Alex, like my premise for what's really going on here, and you mentioned it earlier when you talked about it's the same thing over and over again, not just this season, but last season, is it just seems like Archie has had a hard time getting everybody to buy in and move in the same direction and to play with purpose. And again, whether it's the pack line, whatever offensive system you're running, like whatever you're going to do, like you can have a questionable system, but if everyone's doing it with a purpose, you can win games with it. And you can have the greatest system ever. But if guys aren't buying into it, it doesn't matter. So that to me is the biggest thing that I want to see from this staff and from this program is, can they get these guys going in that direction? Because it looked like they did it last year, after the Minnesota game, and you got a nice run to finish the season there for a while. But it just seems like it's almost like games are a microcosm of entire seasons, where it's like inside of a game, Indiana looks clueless for 10 minutes. And it's like last year during the season, they lose 12 out of 13. It's like for entire stretches of games, they look clueless as a program. And that is where I think fans are just really uneasy about what's happening. And so I just think that has to get fixed before any of this other stuff. And I guess that's why I'm slightly hopeful, because it feels like Archie is maybe coming to that realization somehow, but it's also concerning that we got here again. So,
and it's frustrating for us to talk about too and write about, because we don't know exactly what the problem, if there's an underlying, if there's something like that we don't know about that's a problem. The most interesting question that I think I have for the players right now would be, and we'll never get a transparent answer on this because we just don't get the FaceTime with them. And I think when they get up in the podium, they're unwilling to say certain things or give an honest opinion at times, or for whatever reason, I don't even know if they'd say it behind, if we were in the locker room or had one-on-ones, but like what, as a team, what do you guys want to be? Like, what are you building towards? Do you just want to be out there and playing the games, and it's okay if you win, it's okay if you lose, but I'm an IU basketball player and I'm good with that? Or do you want to be successful? I mean, is your goal to make the tournament? Is your goal to win 9 or 10 Big Ten games? Is your goal just to, get 12 points in a game? Like, I just don't know what this group collectively aspires to be. And I think that's the problem overall, because, you talk about this happening last season. Like, a lot of the same guys that were on that team last year are on this team, right? So if the line was drawn after the Minnesota game, why didn't that message resonate with the older guys and carry over to this season? If you're a coach leading a program, if you're a CEO leading a company, a year later, you shouldn't have to give everybody the same message again. And people that are still in that organization, that team, that company have to re-accept that message. I think that's the biggest thing that doesn't sit well with me about this whole, this theme happening over and over, is like Devonte Green, Deron Davis, Justin Smith, Al Durham, Phinisee Anderson, Rob Phinisee. I don't know who else. All those guys were on last year's team, right? So they got whatever message that was. Why is this happening again? And until these guys figure out what they want to be as a team, they're just going to be mediocre. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Well, it's the biggest concern is that right now this program feels like it has occasional accountability when it needs daily accountability. And that, look, I understand guys have different personalities, and Archie didn't recruit some of these guys, and like all that stuff is fine, and it explains some of it. But at the end of the day, now we're 3 years in, and that's what this program feels like, is a program of occasional accountability, not full time. And that's why you have to, I guess, remind guys of that message, because at some point there just have to be drastic consequences, and guys either have to buy in or they have to not be part of it anymore. Hold that thought, Jerod, because if you want to talk about buy-in and a group of folks that are absolutely bought into IU athletics, let's talk about our friends at Home Field Apparel. They have the most comfortable and unique selection of IU apparel that you will find anywhere. They went down to the Gator Bowl to support the football program. Obviously, we know about the 9 Indiana shirt that they did, but they put out a new football shirt every single week this season. They obviously have some great basketball gear. They put out the shirt celebrating the anniversary of the Watt shot. They've got the really cool old school basketball shoes logo. You know about the Bison hoodie. These guys are Indiana grads. Their company is based in Indianapolis. They support Indiana. We're going to be up there. I'm going to be up there with the Assembly Call team on February 8th for the Purdue game. They're going to be down for that. These guys love IU sports. They are bought in, and you should be bought into Home Field Apparel because their stuff is great. It maintains how comfortable it is even after you wash it. Again, they've got these unique logos that you can't find anywhere else, whether you want T-shirts, long-sleeve tees, crew neck sweaters, hoodies, whatever you need to get ready for the rest of this basketball season, for next football season, to watch the women's basketball team be awesome and play, and all the other IU sports. Home Field Apparel is the place to go to get your stuff. And you do that by going to homefieldapparel.com, browsing their massive selection of IU gear, and then using the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, to get 20% off your entire order. That's Brink, B-R-I-N-K, for 20% off that entire order at homefieldapparel.com. All right, now let's get Dylan's thoughts on this whole concept of Indiana's players needing to be bought in and what Archie Miller needs to do if he can't make that happen. So I don't know, Dylan. What do you think about that? Because you're a little younger than we are, and we're groomed in maybe a different era of basketball that was a little bit of a harder line. Like, do you have a different perspective on this? On where Archie's been criticized for maybe, I don't know if being soft on guys is the word, but maybe being more understanding and more patient than some fans would like him to be.
I mean, I'm not. I don't know. I don't even know. I think I'm more in the same boat as you guys. And the thing that concerns me the most is that when I watch the other Big Ten games that are going on right now, and they are all. I mean, most of them are super competitive, and it doesn't even matter who the team is. Like Purdue just went to Michigan and played 2 overtimes, and Nebraska beat Iowa, and everything's just crazy. And it just, when I watch those teams, the thing that concerns me is I'm just like, I see fight and I see toughness, and it's everything that I don't see from Indiana, and it's super concerning. Like they're after Ohio State, they play at Rutgers and at Nebraska, and those are probably the 2 most winnable road games. But what have they showed you to have any confidence that they can go win those games? And it's just super concerning. And I don't know. I mean, is Archie that soft on them? I don't know. I'm not in the practices. I mean, he seems like very feisty, very fiery in games. But I don't know. I mean, but things aren't changing. We say he seems into it, but
this is where words don't matter. So it's like, Alex, I agree with you. Like, that would be a great question to ask the players in a press conference or one-on-one. And the words that they answer also wouldn't mean anything, because like, you show what you want to be by what you do every day. You show what type of coach you are by what you do, what your players execute, where the lines are that you won't allow things to pass. So that's where we are, is we can't be a program of talk. We need to be a program of action. And it feels right now like there's a little bit more talk than action.
Yeah, and that's why people have a problem with a 12-3 record. People that don't follow Indiana basketball on a day-to-day basis like we do, someone from the outside, someone that maybe follows, some random Big 12 program, they're like, well, Indiana's having a pretty good year. They're 12-3, right? And we say no, because we watch the games on a game-to-game basis, and we say, what was this 12-3 record actually built on? And we can see what's coming if the changes aren't made. And so I think that's, you have certain people, and this is, every day on the message board, every day on Twitter, every day on email, every day on Facebook. It's almost like people have to take one stance or the other. It's either fire Archie, get him out of here, and we need a complete rebuild, or hey, we're 12-3. No, the answer can also be somewhere in the middle of that.
The answer is in the middle of that.
In the middle of that, exactly. And it's also like, hey, it's okay to criticize them when they're 12-3. It's also okay to acknowledge the fact that they beat Florida State and beat some other good teams early in the year. But, we wouldn't be doing our jobs the right way if we said, oh, they're 12-3, everything's okay. I don't think that's actually the truth. And so, we see the same thing building. We see the same thing coming. And unless this team reverses course, what Dylan said is spot on. Their next 2 road games after this are the games that you look at on the schedule and you say, these are the most 2 winnable road games. But does anybody have any confidence that they can go win either of those games right now? I would say no. And that's another thing. Like, the 2 road games they played already, it's not that they got beat, right? If they would have gone to Wisconsin and lost a close game by 7, where Wisconsin made some free throws down the stretch, that's one thing. Maryland, the same thing. But no, they were down by 30 in both games. I mean, that can't happen. I mean, that's, to me, that screams that there's something wrong. And that's the most frustrating thing about it, is we don't know exactly what's wrong. So we're left here to try to diagnose it like we're some kind of psychiatrist or sports psychologist or whatever. And there's just no clear answer.
Well, and the thing to remember is, all the stuff that we're talking about, right now is issues with the team. It's a lot of the same stuff Archie says after all of these games, which I guess on the one hand is good that he seems to recognize it. Like, he doesn't seem to have, you can quibble with the comment that he made about, whether this team has, more shooters than other people think, whatever. But for the most part, his assessments of what ails the team are pretty spot on. People are just losing a little bit of confidence that he can actually do anything about them, which is an important step for, for a coach to be able to do. So, all right, with all of that said, and I agree with all of that, and there are a lot of concerns. Dylan, as you now look forward and you look at this Ohio State game coming up, and what is a real gauntlet. These next 7 games, I mean, you've got 6 games against, I think, all teams that are in the top 40. The other one is a road game at Nebraska, which is always going to be tough no matter what. And 4 of these games are against teams in the current top 7 in KenPom. So, I mean, this is a major slate where this is going to be really tough. And if Indiana plays like they've been playing, they are going to lose the vast majority of these games. Give me some things that you are clinging to for hope that Indiana is going to be competitive in these games, that things can improve. Because we know the issues, but are there, what can you give us that is hopeful?
I'll start with Ohio State, and I'll say, it's good that it's at home. Obviously, Northwestern, the crowd there were a decent amount of people there, but they didn't have much to cheer for a while. When Indiana started making the run and everybody was into it, they just looked like a different team out there. And you should expect a big crowd for Ohio State because they're number 11, and classes start Monday, so students are probably all going to be back, and it should be a lot of energy in that building. And the team just plays different when they have that behind them defensively. They just look more engaged. So I will say, those home games against those big teams, you always think there's a chance just because of how the team plays at home, how the crowd can get them into it. And we saw it against Florida State. It was just that first big crowd of the year, and they just exploded. I'm hopeful for performances like that where they just look engaged defensively, and because of that, they get out in transition, they run, and they get some big plays, get the crowd going, and just feed off that energy. I'm hopeful. I liked what I saw in that 10-minute stretch because you had, it was mostly Al Durham and Armand Franklin were kind of the 2 guards, which, if you would have told me that those would be the guards kind of bringing you home, I would be like, really? I wouldn't think that. But, they were playing pretty well. Trace Jackson Davis, when he runs down the floor after they get a defensive rebound or whatever, he just goes straight tries to get deep post position, and he just turns around. If they can get it to him, then he's either going to get scored or get fouled. It's a good recipe for success, when they can get that quick. When they have to settle in the half court, things get a little more challenging. I've heard, Jerod, you talk about this a lot. If, Rob Phinisee, if he's getting back to where he, was able to be at last year, he's slowly getting more healthier. He didn't play a whole lot against Northwestern, but he came in toward the end, and, we had that really nice lob to Trace Jackson Davis. So I'm hopeful because I like what I see from him, and that lineup we saw on the floor against the end of Northwestern. If we're going to see a shorter rotation, it's going to be a lot of those guys who play really hard, and less substitutions. Then I'm hopeful that that'll have the guys more engaged, more together, more of a rhythm, more chemistry, and that'll just equal more success on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and this is not breaking any news. This seems pretty obvious. Like, Rob is the linchpin. Like, he cannot be among the group of players that you don't know what you're getting from game in, game out. Like, he's got to be a rock that you can build on, on the offensive and defensive end. And if not, I really struggle to see how Indiana's going to win a lot of games. And obviously, he's dealing with injuries, and you don't know how that kind of stuff can affect a guy's confidence, can affect a guy's mindset. We all see that he just doesn't seem right, and we all just want to see him be the guy that he was at the beginning of last season, and that he was against Illinois and against Michigan State, and some of those other games that gave us a lot of hope. This roster was not built to win without him being that guy. That is in part an indictment of Archie's roster management, but it's just the reality. And so that hopefully that happens. The further removed he gets from these injuries, and the more he can get out there on the court and play.
Yeah, and especially for Ohio State. I mean, I know Caleb Weston is going to be a big focus, but man, those 2 guards, DJ Carton and CJ Walker, I mean, they are quick, and they can cause Indiana a lot of problems because Indiana's had a lot of problems containing other teams' guards, throughout most of this year. And these 2 guards, I mean, I've watched Ohio State throughout the season, and they are both really impressive. And, they're quick, they're dangerous, and you're going to need Phinisee on one of them, and he's going to have to be able to contain them because, obviously they're going to try to put an emphasis to get it down to Weston a lot of the times. But, man, those guards are really good, and Phinisee's going to have to be on top of his game, defending. And he hasn't been like that too much, but if he can kind of get back to that, like you said, it's going to be huge for them.
Guards with quickness and with toughness have really been an Achilles heel for this team to deal with over the last few years. And Ohio State especially. They've really, Devonte went off against them in the Big Ten tournament, but, Rob has struggled against Ohio State. Al Durham was very good against Northwestern. He has struggled against the more physical teams of the Big Ten. These are the guards that we have to count on, and you win with guard play. So, that stuff just has to improve. Those guys have to produce more. Alex, as you look at this, what are some reasons that you're clinging to that this team is going to be ready for this Big Ten gauntlet and ready to win some of these games and get to the 19-20 wins that they'll need to be an NCAA tournament team?
Well, in terms of the home games, I think we've seen over a long enough period of time that Indiana is capable of beating really good teams at home. We saw it last year with Marquette and Michigan State. We also saw, which I mentioned in my preview for the Ohio State game, we also saw examples of Indiana just not showing up at home games last year with Nebraska and Michigan. So that's why it's kind of hard. It's funny that I write what to expect every game. At this point, I have no idea what to expect. So, I think if they use the energy of the crowd and give people a reason to get into the game, it can be a good competitive game. It could be a game that they could win. I also think that if they come out and play defense like they did against Northwestern, they're not going to be able to just trade baskets with Ohio State. Ohio State's too good of a team. You mentioned the physicality. They're sixth nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency. They're not going to let you do whatever you want with the ball, get to whatever spot you want with the ball, shoot easy shots. It's going to be everything you get against them is going to be earned. But, I think being at home is a plus. But overall, this stretch, I don't necessarily see a ton of reason to think that Indiana is going to win a lot of games in it. What I more want to see is Indiana being competitive in all these games. They could play really well in this stretch of 7 games and win 2 or 3 of them. But if they're competitive every time, and by competitive, I mean not what we saw at Wisconsin or Maryland, I think there's reason to believe that this team could get to 18, 19, 20 wins and have a chance to make the tournament. If they don't, kind of change the way they're approaching a game, then, I think things could get ugly, but they do have enough. I don't think that it's a talent thing. I think there's teams obviously in the Big Ten that have better players. I think there's certain teams at Indiana, even if they play their best, if that team plays their best, they're not going to win. But I think kind of in the middle of the league, there's a lot of opportunity to move up, and I think it's just going to be about who wants it most on a night in to night out basis. And so if Indiana kind of just raises its level of maturity and approach and energy on a game-to-game basis, I think there's something that can be uncovered. It's hard to predict which way it's going to go from here. The thing I'm most interested to see, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, either one of you guys, is what happens next with Devonte Green, because I think there was a pretty big statement given in the Northwestern game down the stretch. The fact that he wasn't even on the court in the last 11 plus minutes. So what is the solution there, and what happens next?
Here's what I will say about that, because I've thought about this a lot since that game, and I think the first thing that has to happen, but I think this is true for all of the players, is Archie has to figure it out. Whether explicitly by talking to every single one of them, or just implicitly by watching their actions. Are you fully bought into what we're doing here? And you move forward with the guys who are, and you move on with the guys who are not. That absolutely has to be the first thing. So if, Archie is given reason to believe that Devonte is ready to go and to be a part of this team, here is what I will offer as some hope. And it's actually based on historical precedent. Because, look, we know Devonte is a talented player. He's a mercurial player. Like, you don't quite know what you're going to get from him in any specific game. But we have been here with him before, twice in the last 2 seasons, with a very clear benching, an obvious benching, in a game that Indiana would go on to play pretty well in, and he's actually responded pretty well both times. Last year, it was the Wisconsin game. I think he played like 11 minutes. That was a double overtime game. The other guards are playing 40-plus minutes because Archie just refused to put him back in. Indiana wins a big game without him. He responded to that game. The very next game was the home game against Wisconsin. He made 3 threes. He had assists. He played very well. That sparked the best 7-game stretch of his career, right after the benching. If you go back to his sophomore season, He was benched for the Purdue game, the home game that we lost by 7 points, which was still one of Indiana's better performances that year because that was a really good Purdue team. Robert Johnson couldn't make some shots late, or we would have had a chance to win it. He didn't play. He would go on over the next 6 games, or 6 out of the next 7 games, I think, to play 30-plus minutes and was a big part of the reason Indiana went 4-2. So we now have 2 examples of the last 2 times when he's had a clear, obvious benching and the team played better without him responding and playing his best basketball. Now, should we be past that with him as senior Devonte Green? You would certainly hope so. You would think so. And I'm not going to predict anything because, every season is different. Every situation is different. It's just 2 instances, so you can't even call it a trend yet. But that's what's happened the last 2 times. And so, maybe Devonte is a guy that when he gets comfortable, his fundamentals lapse and his mindset lapses and he forgets to be bought into the team and he reverts back to his old ways. And maybe he needs shocks to his system to get back in the right mindset. And then that shock lasts for 6 or 7 games. That's what's happened the last 2 times. So I'm holding on to that hope. And we'll see in the Ohio State game. And certainly this team needs him. Like that, you feel like that kind of has to happen for Indiana to, as you said, Alex, be competitive over these next 7 games. But again, the first thing that's got to happen is you've got to know he's bought in. I absolutely would not start him. I think there's got to be consequences for the way he played against Northwestern. But if he's ready to go, you give him a chance to come in off the bench. And as Coach Tonsoni has said a lot of times on our show, sometimes there are guys like Devonte where you just don't know what you're going to get from him tonight. You put him out there, you see what they've got. And if in the first 5 minutes, Alex, like you said against Northwestern, you see a guy who's not defending and not even trying to be part of the offensive flow, then you take him out. It's not his night. You're going to get bad Devonte tonight. Let's cut our losses and let's move on. But when he is going well, you ride the hot hand like Indiana did against Florida State and as we've seen in some of these past stretches. So that's how I would handle Devonte. I don't think you just run in and kick him off the team and like all that stuff. But you do need to make sure that he's still engaged and he's fully bought in. And if so, you give him a chance to go out there and prove that he can do, again, what he has done in the past. I don't know. I don't even know what other choice you have, frankly. What do you think, Dylan?
I agree with all of that. Dylan, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, actually. And, for me, watching Devonte Green over the last few years, there have been times in games that I've noticed, after he makes a bad play that's happened against Northwestern, it's happened, last year too, when he makes a bad play and, Archie will bring up a guard to come sub in for him and he knows he's coming out. He will do this, cocky sort of strut to the bench, right to his seat, and just sits right down because he just knows. And it's like he doesn't want to talk. He doesn't even think to go talk to Archie or anything like that. And I just don't think that's a good sign. And, there have been other times this year, like the UConn game was one of them because I was there. And there was a time where something happened and Archie and Devonte literally had their arms around each other, talking, having a very good conversation about, what's going on and, what to fix and whatnot. And I think those are kind of 2 different parallels on when he's engaged and when he's not engaged. But I think the Ohio State game will be an interesting test. Obviously, the last few times he's played Ohio State, he's played well. He hit that one big 3 at home against Ohio State last year at home. And then obviously the Big Ten tournament performance where he basically brought them back to life with his 3-point shooting. But I do agree with Jerod. I will not be surprised if he doesn't start the game. I would, if it's Al or Armon or Rob and Al. Rob has Rob even started a game this year? I don't know if he has.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the starting lineup. And Alex, we were talking about how Archie post game Northwestern was clearly talking about certain players at certain moments, and I don't want to speculate, but there was one instance where he was talking about moving the ball, swinging the ball, and when your shot's not falling, and all I could think about in that quote was Devonte, because who else that has that role would he be talking about? And that's kind of who comes to mind. But, when talking about shortening the rotation, you can't assume that Green's not going to play because of just what he can bring to the table when he is engaged, and I will say when it all has seemed lost for him, as Jerod pointed out, he's responded very well and played with big performances. So, hopefully this Northwestern game kind of reinserts that into him and he'll come out very engaged and ready to go.
Yeah, I don't envy Archie having to handle a player that there are some games you cannot win with him on the court, and then there are other games that you cannot win without him on the court. That's a tough guy to try and handle, but that's why Archie gets paid the big bucks, and that's his job to figure out how to handle it. And he's had 2+ years with him, and at times it has seemed like those guys have gotten on the same page. And maybe with Devonte, not maybe, it's just never going to be smooth with him. And even, the people who are the loudest, the people shouting the loudest in the offseason about Devontae's senior breakout, I raise my hand here. Even those people were fools if they thought that any improvement from Devonte was going to be smooth and linear. Doesn't work like that. It's just not how he is wired. But it doesn't mean that all is lost yet. Because a lot of times with Devonte, as we've learned, when things seem at their worst, it's about to really turn around and get better. And as soon as you really start to believe in it and trust it, it kind of falls through again. But, I think Archie's got to continue to try to reach him until Devonte shows that it's no longer worth reaching him. And that could come a point. And it's possible that came at the Northwestern game. I have no idea what's happened since then. Like I said, if Archie has reason to believe that he's not bought in and he's going to be taking more things off the table, being a cancer in the locker room or things like that, then he's got to cut his losses with it and he's got to move on from it. But I don't know any of that, so I'm just trusting that he's going to be on the team. He's going to be on the court. He'll get a shot to prove it. And I'm going to just kind of keep my hope in the historical precedent that he'll be able to bounce back from it again.
Jerod, how do you see the rotation changing here coming up? I think that to me is one of the more interesting things, not just this game, but the immediate future. Is it going to be a line drawn saying, hey, these are the 7 or 8 guys we're rolling with in a particular game based on how they played the previous game or how they've done in practice? Do you think it's going to be a feel thing? Because I think the problem with what he said the other night now is, the 11-man rotation might not work. I think if there isn't a change this game, I think people are going to wonder, like, why did you say that if nothing's going to change? So I think we're going to see something different. Who do you think how do you think it changes, and who do you think the guys that could be, maybe have a smaller role moving forward would be? I mean, Deron Davis obviously sticks out as a prime candidate to me, and Demezie Anderson. Those are the first two I think kind of come to mind. And it's not that from Demezie's standpoint that he's done anything wrong. I don't necessarily view him as somebody has been, a bad attitude or anything like that. What I've seen him play on the court, it's just he hasn't produced at the level that is acceptable in terms of the minutes that he's gotten at times. Yeah,
I mean, look, Trace Jackson Davis and Joey Brunk have been your rocks. Their roles are solidified. You're basically building everything around those guys. Justin Smith has certainly done enough. He's going to keep playing, and that's 3 right there. And you've only got 4 guards, and some of them are kind of up and down. So unless one of them is like removed from the team, all 4 of those guys are going to play. So that right there is 7 guys, and now you've got Jerome, Race, Demezie, and Deron left. I think Deron is the obvious one just because he hasn't played a ton of minutes. His visible engagement level, just kind of watching body language and stuff, has been probably the most inconsistent, to put it kindly. So now you're there with Race, Jerome, and Demezie, all guys who have at times shown positive signs, but have been inconsistent, and so to me, like, I guess if I had to pick one of those guys, I would say let's roll with Jerome and let him work out some kinks, because he is trying. Like, I think his defense has been a little bit better. He's certainly not lacking for confidence as a shooter, and that, at least having a guy who's confident putting the ball up, it's something for this team. And the only way, to me, that you really raise the ceiling on what this team can accomplish based on what we've seen is that Jerome becomes a credible offensive threat for you. We knew that from the offseason. And let's remember, we all talked about, okay, it's going to take him a while to get going, but maybe by late January, February, March, he's a guy who kind of changes the formula. Well, we're still kind of on track for that, So that's where I would go. But I think it's, it depends somewhat on what happens in practice. And obviously, if guys get in foul trouble, now you're going to need to bring a Race Thompson in. So, like, I don't think we can just say, like, it's only these 8 guys and the rest of them aren't going to play. Like, there are going to be some situations where, maybe you do want to go with a lineup of 4 shooters and maybe you put Demezie in. And I realize right there we're starting to go down the slippery slope of an 11-man rotation again. But I think the challenge for Archie is there just aren't enough guys who have proven that he can count on them game in, game out to know what this is going to be. So if you ask me what my 8-man rotation is, that's the direction that I would go. But I still think you're going to have to, if they're earning it in practice, you're going to have to give Race and Phinisee some opportunities in games to see what they've got, because they both bring things that can help you win ball games. So, if Duran's not showing that he's ready to go, fine. Maybe you can take him out of the rotation for now. But I have a hard time seeing how you can just remove those other guys from the rotation completely when you still kind of need them to develop to be able to do what you want to do this season. I don't know, and maybe that sounds wishy-washy, but I don't see a path right now to just saying, boom, those are the 8 guys. I don't think that's realistic. I mean, please counter me if I'm wrong, or maybe...
Dylan, you have anything on that?
Yeah, I think, I agree with Jerod. Like, I think if anything, it's just going to fluctuate on a game-to-game basis. Like, maybe these 8 guys are going to play this game because they're playing well, and then, another game, someone's not playing well, and he makes a sub, and that person plays well, so then all of a sudden it's just, like, different. Because, like he said, if I look at all 11 players, in some way, shape, or form, they'll be able to help the team if they play up to the potential, if they're engaged, and everything like that. So it's just hard for me to think, like, at this point right now, Archie can just say, like, this person's not going to play anymore. Because, like, how can you just say that already? It's difficult to think how it's going to change. And my best guess is just it'll just fluctuate kind of on a game-by-game basis depending how things are going. And I think what we saw in the final 8 minutes of Northwestern is probably what we're going to see more, is that when a group of guys are playing well, then he's going to ride them out longer. Because he's, like, I think Tom, like, you guys watched Tom Crean more than me. I only had 1 year. It was my freshman year when I saw him play. He subbed like crazy. But this year, Archie's kind of been subbing pretty frequently. So,
yes.
And I think I think Crean was knocked for subbing so much. And Archie's done that a lot this year. And I guess the biggest change that I expect going forward is when a group is playing well together, we will see them playing together for a longer stretch of time.
Yeah.
And not more frequent subs that'll kind of, kill a rhythm just because you're trying to get 11 men in there and spell some guys, So that's what I think will happen. I think, we'll just see more a 5-unit, group playing for longer periods of time, which I think is good, to be honest.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there, which is, the way that I would approach it is I would say, look, there's got to be a minimum that you do in practice to get your opportunity in the first half of this game to get in there. But then if you've got a group in the first half that plays really well, that group should start the second half instead of it always being the same guys, and then ride those guys longer, because it does feel like there have been some times where a lineup has really been playing well and they've got some energy and momentum, and there's even a timeout, so they're going to get a break, and then there's a sub. Man, you've got to ride good stretches of basketball as long as possible. So that, to me, Dylan, seems like the more feasible thing, because unfortunately, the 8, 9, 10 guys on the roster, the guys above them haven't necessarily, no one separated themselves. So you can't pretend like there's a clear answer for Archie, like that we can give right now, but there do seem to be clear answers within games that he should stick with longer. And that I do think is the right way to view it. Alex?
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that. I would just say overall, the challenge for Archie as a coach is, I do think that there was something to the fact that he wanted to play more guys because he thought they could have strength in numbers, and there was maybe a chance that they would have 11 guys that can be productive on a game-to-game basis. But what we've seen is there's too much inconsistency with certain guys on a game-to-game basis. And so you have to, the coaching part of it comes in, whereas being able to see when the game starts, who's ready to go, who's locked in, and then kind of ride those guys the most. The thing I don't like is, if a guy's playing well within a game, play him 32 or 35 minutes. Let him stay out there. It's not like these guys are getting in foul trouble or anything like that. But and it doesn't mean it has to be an every game thing. But if someone has a hot hand and they hit a couple shots, don't put them on the bench. Let them ride it out until they're, until that run is over with. And I think that's, to me, it doesn't mean that only certain guys play, but I think within a game, you want to try to maximize the 7 or 8 guys who have it going the best that game and play them as many minutes as possible. Don't just throw somebody in there for the sake of throwing somebody in there. You have enough timeouts. There's enough TV timeouts. I'd like to see more guys playing 32, 34 minutes when they're having a good game, as opposed to just trying to get everybody in for the sake of trying to keep people happy. I mean, that's only going to work so long. Like, that's how you lose games, and that's how you lose ultimately your job, is if you're trying to keep everybody on the team happy. Just play the 7 or 8 guys within a game that are giving you the best chance of win. And if you're not in that 7 or 8 guys and you have a problem with it, then either practice better, play better, or leave. I mean, that's really, this is college athletics at the highest level. This isn't, rec league ball in 8th grade where everybody's parent gets to say on how much time they're going to get in the game. I mean, this is millions and millions of dollars at stake. This is people's livelihoods at stake. And, just give yourself the best chance to win. And the days of, keeping guys happy, I think has to be over. I mean, you have to have a hardline stance on this and say, this is what we're rolling with. Let's go.
Just take a big picture view of what actually keeps guys happy. Winning. No one's going to be happy if you're making these short-term compromises that don't allow your program to grow, which again goes back to the fundamental underlying thing that has to improve for any of this other stuff to matter. Because the rotation stuff is not going to matter if you don't have everybody in that locker room bought in fully to what's going on and moving forward. And being bought in fully means you might not play in this game, but you're up and you're cheering and you're part of the team because we win together and we lose together, and you're probably a little personally disappointed. We all would be, but you're going to use that as motivation to come back and earn your spot rather than just lamenting the fact that you didn't play and being an energy taker instead of an energy giver because you're just sitting there on the bench, not cheering your teammates on. That's what this program needs to be about if it's going to be successful. So that might be the best place to end on. And hopefully we see some of that manifest itself on Saturday, because that is the thing. Like, the glass is absolutely half full on this season, because as bad as things have been and as bad as certain guys have played, got 12 wins in the bank by January 10th, and a lot of winnable games and a lot of opportunities throughout the rest of the season to pick up quality wins that you're capable of getting. So, like, if Archie, if this is a line in the sand moment and things can get better from here, I guess at least good for him for doing it a month earlier before all was lost, because they can still make a lot of this season. So I know we're mired in some negativity, and for good reason. It's because we're trying to project forward and see what is going to lead to victories. It's all still right there for this team if they can figure some of this stuff out. Doesn't mean it'll be easy, but I do think that the biggest thing that needs to change is relatively simple, and it should be pretty black and white at this point. I guess we'll find out if it is. Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
I do not. I think that's a good way to wrap this one up, and went a little bit longer than I expected, but a lot of good things to say. So hopefully everybody enjoys this conversation.
Yeah, I'd say 2-2 in the Big Ten right now is you're just fine. That's where kind of everyone is. So it's good to be in that boat, even though those 2 losses are bad. But 2-2 right now.
And your 2 wins were the two easiest games possible. Home games against Nebraska and Northwestern. Yeah. That's the thing. It's glass half full, glass half empty. Like that line of water is right in the middle of the cup right now, So it all just depends on what they do from here on out. All right, make sure you go to InsideTheHall.com immediately following the game. Get the minute after and 5 takeaways and all of the analysis. We'll be live on the assembly call as soon as the game ends. And then Dylan, do you have the post-game email for this one, or is Cam doing it for Ohio State?
Cam's doing it for Ohio State.
Okay, so we got the post-game email analysis, so tons and tons of content after that important IU-Ohio State game, and hopefully we all get to write about and talk about a victory, because that would do a lot for this program right now. It's a really big opportunity for Indiana. Hopefully they take it. We will talk to you guys next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com, and visit Alex over at InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.